So, how optimistic are you that Shohei Ohtani will stay with the Angels? The Angels, they gave us an answer. We're going to share it with you. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SiriusXM by searching Locked On Angels. And if you want to give back to the Super Halo Bros for all the Angel content, here's how. You can leave us a rate and a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed, hit that subscription button to become a Locked On Everydayer. And whether you're watching or listening, come on over to YouTube, leave a comment. It's the best way to keep in touch with us and be a part of the conversation.
Thank you for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Hey, we're into our second season of Locked On Angels here with you. In fact, it's our second off season. Last off season, believe it or not, was a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to playoffs getting done, and then we can start getting into the real good news for the Angels of who's getting signed, who's getting fired, all that stuff.
Everybody.
Right. Yeah. But you know what? There's always a storyline with the Angels, as you know, Mike, and we're here to cover it every Monday through Friday here on Locked On Angels. So we're happy that you're here with us. On today's show, are you optimistic that Ohtani will stay with the Halos? Where's your hopium at? Take a nice deep breath of hopium.
Our hopium.
Our Logan hopium. And will things change if Arte doesn't sell? I know every day we get a comment. Nothing changes until Arte sells.
Right.
And you don't have to tell us, guys. We I think we quite understand that very well.
Yeah.
But first, Mike, let's talk about a major reason. The one stat not a lot of people are talking about when it comes to the Halos that led to a very unsuccessful season this year.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why the Angels were terrible this year.
Where do we begin?
This is a 2-part episode. Because we could go on forever.
9-part documentary of the 2023 failures.
We've called 60 Minutes, and they're going to come down and talk to us. The truth is, again, there's a lot that we could talk about: injuries, and we can talk about bad trades, and we can talk about the lack of pitching and all of that stuff. We can talk about runners in scoring position. But there was one thing that stood out to me, Johnny, that I think is indicative of when teams are good and when teams are not good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's unearned runs. We talked about how the Angels were terrible behind Patrick Sandoval and why he really struggled when he was on the mound, because he had people behind him that weren't coming through for him,
right,
and making errors and causing unearned runs. The Angels led the majors with 91 unearned runs allowed this season, John.
Wow.
Now, that's the most since the team has allowed 96 unearned runs in 1996. How very
interesting. I know. I was going to say, why not 23 unearned runs for 2023?
That would have been probably a whole lot better for this team this
Mike,
season.
Tell me about that 96 team, what you remember.
Gosh, 1996. You know what it was? It was the year after the Angels lost that 11-game lead to the Mariners in 95. In 96, they had some of the same players, but they didn't have the same magic that year. I think, off the top of my head, I think that they were close to 500 or finished a couple of games over 500, because with Terry Collins, they were competitive, but they weren't always in the race and making an impact. And so if I remember correctly, it was that cool outfield of like Anderson and Salmon and Jim Edmonds, and they had, I think Erstad was starting to make some waves there as well. Tony Phillips was still on that team, I believe. And so if I'm incorrect, everydayers, you can correct me in the comments. But yeah, that was the last time that they led the league in unearned runs in 1996. Again, I mentioned that Patrick Sandoval was somebody who suffered the greatest consequence for this. The Angels had 23 unearned runs.
There it is.
Behind him.
23 unearned runs. So I got my wish after all.
They decided to save it all for Patrick Sandoval.
Wow.
Johnny, that was the second highest single season total in franchise history. Do you know the first? Do you know the number? And do you know the player?
No.
Okay.
No. Gosh, it could be anybody.
It could be really anybody. I was surprised by this. 24 unearned runs in 1966 behind Dean Chance.
Oh, wow. When was that?
Yeah. Dean is fantastic. And he's an Angel Hall of Famer, had, I think, the first no-hitter, right? Or he was, I can't remember, the first Cy Young winner.
I think it was one of those two. It's Cy Young or a no-hitter. Yeah.
Yes. I think it was Cy Young, and Dean was great. So all of that to say, there's a lot of factors, but I think this is one of the major factors as to why the Angels were not great this year, and as to why the Angels didn't pitch well this year, and why the bullpen really struggled too, right?
Did Dean Chance lose his ever-loving mind at his teammates like Patrick Sandoval did all season long?
Lucky for him, there wasn't social media and a lot of videos, so we don't have that documentation. Patrick Sandoval really was struggling with that. We've talked about that on this show, and behind him, they just couldn't come through. But it wasn't just him, Johnny. It was kind of a gift for every pitcher on this team. And we saw those moments come through when there was a bonehead play, or they threw it over, or, didn't step on home plate, or some of those things happened. And it was really frustrating. And then when injuries started to pile up, they had to play the replacement guys. And then you thought maybe you're getting a really great shortstop in Squid, and
defensively,
he was terrible out there compared to what he was the season before. And we've mentioned this before, but can we just talk one more time about how he was sailing the ball over the first baseman's head against the Chicago White Sox? It was not the Squid that we had come to know. And then they kept saying, well, he's in there for his defense, when we had a really great player in AAA named David Fletcher that was just swimming in the pond waiting to be called up. Johnny, all that to say this and to ask you a question. How does Perry solve this? What does Perry need to do? Because there's a lot that he needs to do. And we're going to do a show as what would be the first priority and second priority. But just talking in generalities right now, what can Perry do to solve this? Is this an in-house issue? Is it a coaching issue? Is it getting different players outside of the organization? Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting. You consider Squid's season and how awful he was compared to 2022, and we're thinking, all right, yeah, his bat has never been good, but at least he's saving runs out there and he's making plays and whatnot. And then that goes out the window in 2023. And you're right. Like, it bothers me when people like Perry or Arte or Arte's yes men say, oh, they really want to win. But then you have guys like David Fletcher sitting in AAA for contract manipulation.
Yes.
That's not wanting to win.
Right.
And who's responsible for that? I don't know. Perry's the one who gave him the contract, so I'm not sure why there was some wishy-washiness there. At the same time, David Fletcher is not going to win you games, but he is going to save you runs, and he is going to make great plays. And so I understand the expectation of, hey, Squid can do it. He's a good defensive replacement, but he wasn't, and he proved that. And he proved that time and time and time again for the times that he was on the field. So in terms of Perry Minasian trying to correct this problem, I think of the Phillies of last year. Remember how bad they were on defense, but their offense was just like so overpowering. Yeah. I think they do a really good job of prioritizing offense, but at the same time, it really comes at the expense of defense. What do? Well, they go and get Brandon Marsh for Logan O'Hoppe and shore up the outfield. You can play Marsh in center, left, right, wherever you want. And that's one small move in the right direction for them. So to me, I think the Angels need to identify, number one, who the biggest culprits are, because it's not going to be Neto all the time. I know he wasn't perfect out there, but when you consider what he does, throwing to third base when the runner least expects it and stuff like that, that's the kind of stuff that you want to see out of your defenders. And when Squid is out there and throwing the ball into the dugout, like Wayne Randazzo was saying, he's, not trying to, Phil Nevin isn't coaching him to throw it into the dugout.
Right.
You really have to look at like who the culprits were and could be for 2024 and figure out how you shore that up. I mean, I think about Brandon Drury, pretty good second baseman. Yeah. Wasn't particularly great at first base all the time. I think about Rendon and his sidearm, underarm throwing from third base and sailing it over the first baseman's head, whether it was Drury or somebody else. Yeah. It's another culprit.
And if I could just comment on that for a moment, like that's the thing, because he's been injured and because he's been kind of a knucklehead, that's the thing that's kind of been buried in his story and in his baseball career, at least for this season, is He wasn't great defensively. He wasn't great at all.
At least not on throwing plays.
Very lackadaisical over there. And he had some great diving stops, but then he would throw the ball away, or if he would just have a random moment where it was just a normal play, he would lack the fundamentals. And that's something you and I've talked about often, is this team just doesn't have those boring, another regular play, fundamental type of players, right?
Well, you don't want to hold your breath every time the ball gets hit to the infield and go, is it going to happen?
Right.
I don't know. And that's what it feels like constantly watching Angels baseball this last year. And even back in 2022, I'd say the same thing. All of that to say, Mike, I think the biggest thing Perry can do is identify which players are lacking in the defensive department. And then if Benji Gill remains as the infield coach, maybe there's a conversation to be had there. Maybe there's some instruction that needs to take place, or a different kind of practice that needs to take place. Look, for as great as he did managing Team Mexico, and I know he's a candidate for the managerial role, as far as being the infield coach, I think that falls on him. I think it falls on Nevin. I think it falls on Benji Gill. And you really have to understand why these things aren't being shored up at the end of the day. And really, it's your job to get those things shored up and make sure that you don't have 91 unearned runs this season.
Right. Johnny, there's a classic movie called Hoosiers, and Gene Hackman is the coach of this small town basketball team. And he shows up, and the team had won 15 games the year prior, and one of the dads is helping. And when he shows up to practice, the dad says to him, "We're going to do 5 on, 5 off, and work them through." And he goes, "Nope, I don't like that at all." And then you see kind of a compilation of different scenes of them working on chest passes and bounce passes and working on layups and all the things that really are fundamental. But why are we practicing this? And he said, if we don't do this well, we're not going to do anything else well. And if I'm Benji Gill or whoever they bring in, manager, coaches, that's the first thing I'm doing with this team. Like, it's going to be spring training all throughout the year, especially if I see stats like this. And so that's what this team really needs, is they need somebody to crack the whip on the basic things that this team could do right. And if they just get the basic things right, Johnny, perhaps they can reach the 85 to 90 win plateau, because a lot of these unearned runs cost them games and cost them wins.
Absolutely. And you heard it all the time from Phil Nevin. These guys come in, they're prepared, they practice every day, they prepare every day. Well, what's the preparation look like? What does the prep on the field actually do for them at the end of the day, if they're continuing to make errors and give up unearned runs the way that they have? To be number 1 in the league is an indictment. To be 15, okay, you had some bad luck. You also had some miscues. But to be number 1 in the league with 91 unearned runs is just unacceptable, and is a big part of the Angels' failure this season. Hey, coming up on Locked On Angels, the Angels are cautiously optimistic about Shohei Ohtani returning to the team. Why is that? Well, we're going to tell you here in just a minute.
Locked On Angels is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Johnny, there's a lot of reasons to like Bird Dogs, and you and I have a couple of pairs of shorts and swim trunks. But one of the reasons why I love Bird Dogs, and you're going to laugh at this, is because you know that I'm always sitting crisscross applesauce, right? Like I'm notoriously doing that.
Are you doing it right now?
I'm actually doing it right now. And the reason why I'm able to do it is because I'm wearing Bird Dogs, Johnny, because they're flexible, they're agile, and I love these. I went to the doctor not too long ago and had to get, blood work and all that stuff, and I got weighed. And I've been 180 to 185 forever, right, since high school. And he weighed me and I was 205. Like, what happened, right? I'm fat.
Oh, poor you.
The great thing is that you can't tell them my Bird Dogs, because these things fit you. You don't have to try to fit into them, and they make you look slim, and they're good for all sorts of occasions. If you're just hanging around the house, or if you're going to go out and go golfing or go on a date, or you could even go to something pretty fancy and look really good in your Bird Dogs. And we want you to look good as well. So check out birddogs.com/lockedonmlb, and you'll get yourself a pair of Bird Dogs shorts and pants there. And when you're checking out, use our promo code LockedOnMLB, and they're going to give you a free Bird Dogs water bottle, and you're going to want that. So once again, birddogs.com/lockedonmlb. And then when you're checking out, after you buy your pants and your shorts, use our promo code LockedOnMLB. John and I promise you're not going to want to take your bird dogs off. They're that comfortable.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Hey, Locked On Everydayers, you know that we have Fan Mail Friday coming up. So get your questions into us at Locked On Angels on Twitter, at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. You can even get us at the YouTube comments down below the video. And just let us know it's for Fan Mail Friday. You can also give us a call on our voicemail line. That number's in the episode description. We want to hear from you. So bring in your questions. Come one, come all to our mailbag. It's Fan Mail Friday on Locked On Angels.
All right, I want to preface this next conversation with take it or leave it, because you can believe about maybe 40% of this, because the report that we're about to share with you came from Bob Nightengale of USA Today. So Bob is notoriously incorrect, notoriously has some really interesting and maybe untrue things.
And he's a jinx.
Are rumors. And he is a jinx. Yes, he does say some things.
We call it getting boobed. Boob Nightengale.
Yes. And he's kind of throwing a wrench in the entire Angels organization, because he's tweeted about things like, hey, you better watch them, see what they're doing, and all of that stuff. And so that's the caveat. Now we can do the segment, Johnny. Bob Nightengale of the USA Today reported yesterday that the Angels are cautiously optimistic that Ohtani is going to re-sign with them. And there's a couple of reasons why. First reason is the Angels have been largely non-competitive during Ohtani's time in Anaheim. Really, Bob? Really? Largely non-competitive? So they've not been competitive at all.
Yeah.
It's in Anaheim. And there's a belief that Ohtani, as we've talked about on this show, wants to be the reason why the team turns it around.
Wow, it's like we're correct every now and then. Wow.
Broken clock is right twice a day, right, Johnny?
That's right. Hey, you got it right that time.
Yeah. So, and then second reason is that he was thankful that the team tried to go all in and get to the playoffs last season. So there's been rumors about his gratitude about that. And then third, there's speculation that Ohtani only wants to play on the West Coast and he loves Southern California. And because he wants to help this team win, he wants to stay in Anaheim. Weather's always great in Anaheim. And then they also shared, here are some reasons why he might want to leave. And there are reasons that we're aware of: Arte's ownership and his inability to resource the team in a significant way, trading all the young players to go all in. And there are some reports that Ohtani wants a team with a developmental structure for young players and the resources to back it up. And there was talk that he was eyeing like the Blue Jays, because the Blue Jays have done that really well. So, Johnny, you know where I stand. I am of the opinion that Ohtani will resign and he will be back. I won't be shocked if he doesn't, but I wouldn't be shocked if he does. I think that he is going to I think right now he's probably 70-30 going to come back. I know I might sound like a fool to a lot of people, but there's just something in my gut that says that that's going to happen. But I want to ask you, are you cautiously optimistic?
I've always been cautiously optimistic about it, because I agree with all of the things that are here, that he wants to be the team that turns this franchise, or he wants to be the player that turns this franchise around. We've been shouting that from the rooftops for the last 2 years that we've been doing this show.
Yeah.
And everyone comes down on us. He can't wait to get out of there. Blah, 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 blah. And so to hear that, I know it comes from Bob Nightengale, but to hear that, it's made sense. And it didn't just start making sense. It's made sense for a while. Like, you want to be the guy who helps turn the franchise around. And I think Ohtani is that kind of person. He's that kind of player. And why not? I don't see any world where he wants to play second fiddle to somebody else or just be another piece of the puzzle. Like, I think that he is the centerpiece that you build around from. And even though he can't pitch next year, which also I think lends itself well to the Angels re-signing him, whether that's short-term or long-term. If it's short-term, maybe it's, hey, prove that you can pitch again in this short-term contract. Or if he gets a long-term deal, then you know that they're invested in him just as much as he's invested in the team. Somebody on our YouTube comments made a really good point, and they said, Ohtani has always said that he wants to win, but he never said if he wants to do that for another team. He never said that he wants to go to another team just so he can win it all. And maybe that points to the fact that he wants to win here with the Angels. Yeah. And maybe he sees enough of the situation to recognize that, hey, there's some pretty good young guys coming up. And that leans into the player development and the fact that they want a development structure for young players and the resources to back it up. And if that's part of the conversation, I know you can't write that into a contract. Like, in order to get me, you must do A, B, and C. Maybe it can be. I don't know.
Can you?
Right? Well, that's the thing. I think that like where Trout lacked in terms of, hey, what's the plan? How are we moving forward? How are you going to build this team around me being your franchise guy? Maybe Ohtani and Nesbalelo, by extension, his agent, can bring some of those conversations to the table and say, look, here's what we want to do for you. Now, what are you going to do to make that happen?
Yeah.
You have to have player development. You have to have the structures in place. You have to have the resources to back it up. We can't go out and sign these huge contracts of guys that aren't going to help us out. They're not a good fit. Like Matt Chapman. I mean, he's going to be the best bat, weird to say, on the free agent market.
Right.
Matt Chapman isn't who this team needs. They need to go out and get the players that they need.
Yeah.
Not the best player or the superstar leading the free agent class at the end of the day. Now, some of the starting pitchers, of course, like you need those guys on your team because the Angels need a frontline starter, and there's probably 2-3 that would be a good fit. So all of that to say, I would love to see Nesbalelo and Shohei Ohtani bring some of these wants and non-negotiables to the table with Arte Moreno, John Carpino, Perry Manassi, and those guys. That's what needs to happen here, Mike. And I feel like Shohei has enough influence and sway and what else? Like just an aura and the revenue that comes along with having Shohei Ohtani on your team.
Yes.
I mean, good grief.
There was a great report just last week that said in Japan that he stirred up in United States dollars, $300 million in economic surplus there. I mean, this guy's bringing resource with him wherever he goes. And so it's a no-brainer to re-sign him and to offer him the best possible contract, right?
Yeah. And it gives him the room to say, here's what I want. Here's what this team needs. Here's what I want to see. And I think that considering all that he brings to the table, I'm going to listen to Shohei Ohtani when we get to the negotiation table. And I hope the same is true for the Angels front office.
Locked On Angels is brought to you by FanDuel. October baseball is a whole lot of fun. Johnny, I said it on yesterday's show, and I'll say it on today's show. It's nice to see the Rangers up 2-0 on the Astros. How about that,
Rangers?
Right?
Shout out to our friend Bryce over at Locked On Rangers because he's having himself a good time. I think he's stressing himself out too. So just enjoy the ride, my friend. You made it. You're there.
You don't want to be in our position, but you can enjoy October baseball if you are in our position with FanDuel. They're America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, you can join and get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, create your new account, and then you can get on all the action from the first pitch to the final out. You can bet on strikeouts, home runs, who's going to win the game. If you don't want to watch the whole game, then you can predict what will happen in the next at bat with quick bets. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now. You can step up to the plate this postseason with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
All right, getting into our last conversation of the day. Every single episode, Mike.
Yep.
Every show.
Everyone.
Whether it's on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, doesn't matter where it comes from. Somebody always says, things won't change as long as Arte owns the team. Or it doesn't matter as long as Arte is in charge. Fine. Let's just not do a show. All right. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first list. We just won't do a show if that's what we're gonna do.
And the funny part is that comment is made and it's not even relevant to what the show is about. And so I don't even know if somebody is even watching it when they leave that comment. They're just leaving that comment, which we all know. We all know that Arte is not the greatest owner. We know that. And so always putting that comment down doesn't move anything forward. It's just sideways energy, right? It doesn't move anything forward. And so as fans, we're thinking about like, okay, here's the reality. How do we live in this bubble? How do we live in this capsule, right? Within these boundaries. And that's what fans need to do. And that's what this team needs to figure out. Because as of right now, Artie's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so we need to figure out, we need to think through as fans, what does this team need to do in that reality? That's why we have these conversations every single day.
Well, and somebody said, well, as long as Artie's in charge, they're not going to get Dave Roberts. He won't want to go. You can't tell me that if the Dodgers fired Dave Roberts, Artie wouldn't be chomping at the bit to stick it to the Dodgers and bring Dave Roberts.
Because it's not a baseball decision. It's a stick it to the Dodgers decision, right?
Exactly.
Like Artie is the king of not making baseball decisions.
So having said all that, we understand that with Arte in charge, the Angels are in this box, this bubble, the way that you put it, Mike. And we have to operate within that reality. We have to understand that, yes, probably won't go over the luxury tax, which is why we don't bring our picks for free agencies or whatever and be like, oh, we got to get this guy and this guy and this guy. Because we know that's not going to happen. You look at our GM free agent picks from last year, and we literally had the dollar amount on each of our picks because we know that that's not going to be a reality. You were even more frugal than I was. Turns out the Angels went vastly above the projected salary that we had, or the payroll that we put down. But here's the thing. We feel you. We understand. But is it true? And why do we say that? Why don't you explain, Mike?
Well, Johnny, the Angels were successful under Arte from 2003 to 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had a 2014 season where they were successful. And the thing is that those were under Arte's leadership. And even in 2014, under John Carpino as the team president. And so there are moments where they have been successful. The question really is, what caused them to be successful in those moments? And I think what we can point back to in 2003 to 2009 is Bill Stoneman was there, and they had some really good baseball people there.
A lot of people from the Disney era, believe it or not, like our holdovers and carryovers from that. Yes.
Yeah. And which, makes sense because it seems like Disney, maybe top leadership isn't fantastic, but it seems like Disney understands how to make things work and make things move forward and be effective for those that are receiving the product, right?
They let baseball people do baseball things. Yeah. They weren't involved. They weren't, you didn't have Walt Disney down there making decisions. I know it wasn't Walt Disney. I understand.
Right.
But I'm just saying, like, you don't have Mickey Mouse coming in telling you what to do.
Yep. And so I think that is the key for where the Angels are currently at. And with Perry Minasian there, again, this is why you and I are a fan of him and want him to continue to be the general manager, even though the team hasn't been great, is because we've seen baseball moves taking place. We've seen great draft moves specifically like taking place. We've seen him make some really great trades. It wasn't just getting the big guy and going and getting this guy. I mean, there was a whole discussion about Trey Turner, and I would have loved to have Trey Turner, but we wouldn't have had the other pieces that we had this season, and we would have lost another draft pick, and we would have had to give out a huge contract. And Perry was like, no, let's spread it around. Right. And so this is why we're optimistic about this team and why under Arte's leadership, we're thinking that maybe perhaps things could move forward because Perry's there.
You just had a light bulb moment, or I just did. You gave it to me. And
you're welcome.
It's Perry is operating within the world of Arte Moreno. Again, that same bubble that you and I are talking about. How can this team improve under this bubble of Arte Moreno? And that's the perfect example. Arte Moreno wants to go out, get the splashy free agent. Fantastic. We all would have been excited about that up until Trey Turner struggled for the first half of the season, 3/4 of the season. Then we would have been ticked off and furious.
And Angel fans wouldn't give him a standing ovation. They get there in the third inning and leave in the seventh.
And Perry Minasian, well, he worked within the realm of Arte and said, no, I think that we need to use that money. If you're not going to go over the luxury tax, then we need to use that money and get ourselves 4 to 5 players for the cost of one Trey Turner. And I think that's exactly what happened. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about operating within the world and the bubble of Arte Moreno. That's why we have these conversations on how to get better. And that's why we've subscribed to Perry in terms of making baseball decisions under this regime of John Carpino and Arte Moreno.
Yeah, I think you get the right manager and you get the right coaches. And I think that you have a right fit with Perry and with whoever the manager is,
Mhm.
we're going to see a team that's going to be fighting for that third wild card spot. And I know that the roster needs to be developed a bit, and I know they need to add some pieces to it, but I don't think that they're that far away. Now, I know it's October, and we're in the Angel fandom where we're suddenly optimistic again. We've used that word a lot on the show.
I'm not.
But but I do think that we're in a place where perhaps a couple of pieces would help this team to be successful. And the biggest thing is I feel like Perry has more of his guys than he has of other guys, including players on this team, not just front office guys, including players on this team as well.
Absolutely. And again, it's taken him these last 3 years to bring in the pieces that he wants to bring in. And now he's finally at the opportunity to bring in a manager who he can work with well, who will communicate the plan for better, for worse. You know what? Perry and his front office could come up with a plan and it could be a total disaster, and we'll call him out for it and we'll call it out and criticize it. But the thing is, until there's a continuity and a through line from the front office to the manager that he selects, it's hard to judge whether their plan or the manager's plan is going to work. And so if they're all on the same page, then I think it's fair to go, all right, is this working? Is it not working? What can change? What needs to be different? All that stuff. Mike, I also, this happened yesterday. Our favorite Marlins fan in our YouTube comments, Thomas Joseph, is going to be very upset that I'm bringing this up. I'm sure he's upset about the fact that this happened. But the Marlins and Kim Ng parted ways because the Marlins wanted to make her number 2 and bring in a boss for her to be president of baseball operations. And she's like, why don't you just make me president of baseball operations? I'm the GM who in 3 years got the Marlins to the playoffs. Don't count 2020. That doesn't count. They picked up all these waiver wire guys. That doesn't count. And she did a tremendous job. And now she's out there. I would love to see her be our president of baseball operations over Perry Manassian and let him continue to be the GM. I think that'd be fantastic. Now, whether Arte would do that or not, I'm not sure. But if it meant that she came in and John Carpino was out, or maybe he takes a step back from all of the meddling and whatnot, that would be fantastic. But again, Mike, there's a very big shift, like you said, from 03 to 09 until they signed Pujols and got the big TV deal. It was baseball decisions. And then it became money-making and marketing decisions. Now, maybe they're at a point where they can make money-making, marketing decisions and have a good team on the field because they've made their money. They have a great selling price. So I think it's time that Arte lets baseball people do baseball things once again.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Remember, we're here every single Monday through Friday, and Fan Mail Friday is coming up on Friday. We'd love to hear from you. Johnny, how can they reach out to us?
Yeah, get at us at Locked On Angels on Twitter and at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. The best way to reach us is also in the YouTube comments. So come on over to the video, comment below. Mike, what do we have on deck for tomorrow's show?
You've promised it. You've teased it. And now it's coming. The pitch efficiency conversation will happen tomorrow on Locked On Angels.
Buckle up, nerds, because we're doing the numbers, and I've got some really good information about which pitchers were efficient and in what starts they were efficient versus when they were inefficient. And it points to a big problem with Angels starting pitching. We'll talk about all of that tomorrow on Locked On Angels. Until then, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Thanks for being here with us, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.
Buckle up, nerds.
Buckle up, nerds. We're doing the numbers.
Still need a shirt.
We do
Buckle
need a
up,
shirt.
nerds.
Let's get that shirt.